Welcome to In the Seams, a podcast by Broken and Mended. And now your host, David Heflin.
I want to welcome you back to In the Seams, and this is a podcast where we talk honestly about life with chronic illness and chronic pain, and about the surprising ways God meets us in the seams of our brokenness. And today I'm grateful to be joined by Dana Hargus, who is a licensed professional counselor with nearly 25 years of experience working with children, adults, and families through trauma, chronic stress, nervous system dysregulation, sensory disorders, adoption and foster care challenges, addiction, and chronic pain, and I'm sure other things that I did not mention. Dana also uses something called biofeedback, which we're going to learn a little bit about here in a moment. It's to help people learn what calm and safety feel like in their bodies. And she is launching, and rather I should say she has launched a new initiative called Restore of Ada, as well as a follow-up program and a program that is able for anybody to take advantage of it across the world. We'll talk about it in a moment, called Restore Plus, which is an online platform extending this restorative work to even more people. So Dana, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, fellow Oklahoman. Dana is down south from where I am. I'm in northwest Oklahoma in Woodward, and Dana is in Ada, Oklahoma. And so I'm excited that you reached out to us and to hear about your program, because we're always looking for ways to give people, some kind of hope that they can hold on to, that something can be better than what it's been for them and what they're going through. And so I think it's helpful for our readers to have a little bit of knowledge about your own story, about kind of how you got into what you're doing today. So what first drew you into counseling, and how has your personal journey, and both as a clinician but also as a follower of Jesus, how has that shaped the way you care for people who are hurting?
Well, I started my life as an adult as a teacher, and I mostly taught special education. And I was very disenchanted with what we were able to do to help the kids deal with their mental health problems. Because the last few years, I worked with kids that were labeled emotionally disturbed. I think they've changed some of the terminology now, but
Okay.
that was the label. And I spent some time at Kojak, which is a facility basically that incarcerates teens. And I just look around and think, we aren't helping them. And when you think about the educational piece, you're not ready to learn if you're not emotionally safe. It doesn't matter if you are safe. If you don't feel safe, you don't learn, because the body and the brain just says, I have to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I had two adopted sons, and one of them was really struggling. And he basically could not go to school without medication. And I was just in a constant battle trying to keep the meds low, because they changed him. It's like his affect was flat. And I just felt like he wasn't the same person, and his greatest strength was his personality. And we were taking it from him just so he could be still and do what people wanted him
Right.
to do. So that was a struggle. And I was kind of, both of those things were going on at the same time. And I was working on my master's in counseling, and I heard about biofeedback. And I knew instantly that my son needed that. But when I began to look into it, there were only two people in Oklahoma doing it. And they were both doing it as a private pay thing. And I didn't have the money or the time to drive to them, or the ability to get that for my son. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm like, and now I really believe it was the Lord. I think that just that prodding and prompting of it's time to make a change. And in the end, I did make a change, and moved out of education into this field. And I have been here for 25 years. And I feel like great things happened for my son and for me.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I'm glad to hear that about your son as well as the work that you are doing. Sounds like it's very fulfilling, and it sounds like it is accomplishing more than what you were able to see as a special ed teacher. A lot more, it sounds like. And I find some of that relatable. My wife is a special ed teacher by education and has been involved in programs that were kind of interventionist type programs, but I think she felt the same type of frustrations at times about how much we're really helping people, how much are we really addressing the underlying causes to what's going on. And we also were involved in foster care for a while and had some experience with kids who'd been through trauma, and that was quite an eye-opening experience for us as
Right.
well. And I know that, as you talked about being part of your story with your adopted kids and everything, that was something that drew you into this type of work. And so, want to before we let me just pause on something you said there about biofeedback, because our listeners probably aren't familiar with that term, at least most of them. I know I wasn't beforehand. And so, could you just kind of tell me a little bit, right? And we'll get into it more later, but in essence or a nutshell, what would you say biofeedback is?
Simply put, biofeedback is exercise for the brain. Just like if you exercise your body can become more flexible and change. If you exercise your brain can become more flexible. You can calm things down in a way that talk therapy will never do.
Okay, so it's something that not only supplements but truly goes beyond what talk therapy is able to
Sure.
accomplish. And I want to kind of steer this a little bit toward our audience. Most of our audience are people who are struggling with chronic pain and chronic illness. And so they wake up already hurting. And certainly any of them would tell you it's not just physically, it's emotionally, it's spiritually.
Mhm.
And so, from your perspective, how do trauma and chronic stress affect the body in ways that intensify physical pain or chronic illness?
If you look at the literature, it tells us that stress is anywhere from 85% to 90 something percent causal in all problems.
Really?
I believe every problem is emotional before it's physical. It's in no way negating the physical issue. And I've read interesting things. Years ago, there was a study that I had, and I wish I still had it. It's like I need to go look for it again. You use something and then you lose it somehow. But it talked about the correlation. It basically, the abstract on the study said there is no causal effect of a crushed disc in back pain. And I thought that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. What is this? So as I read through it, it said there are people who have disc issues that have no pain. There are people that have no disc issues and have pain of a 10. There are it just kept it said you can't show that it's causal because it's not consistent. And I know that a lot of people would want to like dispute that, and to me that isn't what the point of the study was. I
Okay.
just think that for my perspective, what it caused me to focus on is a lot of times our attitudes and our outlooks have a lot to do with what we perceive. And like in Philippians 4:8, it says think on these things, whatever is good, whatever is right, whatever is holy, think on these things. And I think we look at that like it's a suggestion. And I think God was saying this is a life plan.
Hmm.
Think on these things, because whatever you think on it, there's so much power there. And if you believe you're going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be the worst day ever, it's very likely it will. If you look at your husband and you think on all the things you hate about him, every time he does them, you will notice it. But the opposite is true as well. When we think on positive things, when we think on what is good and right, and on whatever we can grab a hold of for that day to go, oh, this is the good and right thing. I saw that my husband fixed breakfast for the kids, or he got up when the baby cried last night. What a good man I have. If you think on those things, then you're going to notice those things more. And when you like correlate this to pain, um, I think there's a lady, and her name is Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and she's like a neuropsychologist. She's brilliant. I think she's from South Africa, but she's in America now. And she's run these studies where she looks at all of the numbers, like how much cortisol do you have, how much inflammation in your body. She does urine work, urine test, blood test. And then she has people um, sit back and think on something that is negative. And what she has determined that in as little as 3 minutes, you can shift every chemical in your body.
Wow.
It's like
Yeah.
a cascading effect. It's astounding.
Yeah.
So she did that work first. And then the next thing she did was she did it in reverse, and she had people think on good things. And the great news is you can shift every chemical in your body in as little as 3 minutes. And all of those chemicals impact the amount of pain you feel. Like it's like sometimes I feel like I'm encouraging people and I know that I offend them. And I just want to like make sure that I don't do that to your listeners, because what I feel like when I hear something like that, I'm like, wow, there's so much power in that. Like anybody can sit down and think, oh, what makes me happy? It's like if I just sit and look at pictures of my grandkids for 10 minutes, I feel happy. Like it's just like, oh, they're so cute. Like, oh, I remember that day. It doesn't take a lot to shift me from one place to another. But I can also look at something that happened at work today. And if I want to sit in that, before long, I am frustrated and aggravated and like, and I'm not changing a thing except myself. It's not like I have to, I don't need to avoid the problems, but I also don't have to focus constantly on what is wrong. So to me, I think we should see that as an encouragement. It's something we can do anywhere. We can sit in the car and think on something better. We can lay in our bed and think on something. It's like we have the power to think at our disposal. We should use it wisely.
Well, I appreciate that. I also appreciate your sensitivity and the way that you nuance that. And I could tell your heart behind it. There are times where people that have chronic pain or chronic illness have been dismissed with a comment along the lines of, "Well, it's all in your head," I totally heard that that's not what you were saying. So I appreciate that. On the other hand, we are trying to extend hope to people, and I think telling them, well, there's absolutely nothing you can do is not real hopeful. And so I think that is good that we can say, okay, well, there is something that can help. And obviously we believe in the power of prayer. That's something that can help. That also is, though, turning our mind away from just internally the pain and the stress that we're feeling. And but you've talked about, and some of the other things were, I don't remember if it was your website, your podcast, but just how talk therapy alone, which can be certainly good. And because that's at least a first step for a lot of our listeners, because a lot of people still have this stigma about going and getting help, for their mental health. And people with chronic pain and chronic illness have a high degree of mental health struggles compared to the general population. And so we've had many counselors come on to this show, and we've always encouraged people to seek out help. But talk therapy has a limitation. It can only go so far, if I understand your thinking on that correctly. And so what does that mean for someone who feels stuck? Maybe they're already in therapy. Someone who wants to heal but whose body isn't responding. Or maybe another way to come at that is just why talk therapy can only take you so far.
Right. I think that oftentimes pain can be traumatic. And when we are in a state of trauma, we are sliding in and out of fight, flight, or freeze. Each of us have a kind of a different we tend to do one or the other when under great stress. Not that we couldn't do all, but if we're doing that, we often don't even know it. Like sometimes, obviously, fight is more overt. If every time somebody gets stressed, they come out punching or verbally, descend upon people, that's more obvious. But some people are just scuttling into the corners. They're just trying to run away, and when the brain is doing that, it is not easy. It's not impossible with a consenting, motivated adult to talk our way out of it. But some people are unable to see that that they're doing that. And if you can't see it, how do you talk about it? Like, you really can't. It's like you're just kind of stuck. And oftentimes we're not dealing with adults. Sometimes we're dealing with kids, or sometimes we're dealing with elderly people who maybe their brain function isn't what it used to be. And so that cognitive intervention isn't always helpful. And that's where biofeedback is great.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and we're about to get right back into biofeedback. I know we introduced it a little bit earlier in the conversation. I do want to ask you one question just to get your perspective on this before we move into a more direct talk about biofeedback, is that Christians, because we're coming at this from a Christian perspective with in the seams and broken and mended, and we do encounter a lot of times people have misconceptions about some of these things, even about chronic pain and chronic illness itself, but also about trauma, our emotional makeup and healing and what that involves. So what misunderstandings have you seen that Christians or the church have about trauma and some of these other related things?
Well, sadly, I think sometimes the church, maybe unintentionally, puts this burden on people that if you pray about it and it doesn't go away, then you're somehow less spiritual. Like, if you're having all these problems and you're not finding your answers in the Lord, then you're somehow insufficient, or you haven't done the wrong thing, or to seek something else. I have had people, it doesn't seem to happen as much as the years have gone on. It's like now I kind of have a reputation as being a Christian counselor, and people know me, and it seems like the church at large is super open to what we're doing. They send people here, and I see a lot of people that come here because I'm a Christian. But those early years were kind of heartbreaking, because people would come in and cry, and at some point they would say, I've been trying to come here for 2 years. And I'm like, what do you mean? And well, I would call and make the appointment, then I would call and cancel. And I'm like, how come? Well, I just felt like if I was the kind of Christian I should be, I wouldn't need your help because I have
Wow.
God's help. And that makes me so sad. And I feel like it's interesting too, because people don't tend to think that about taking a pill. They might be on an antidepressant, anti-anxiety medicine, and they're fine with that. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but I just think it's interesting that we're willing to say this is an allowable intervention, but then this intervention means I'm not spiritual enough.
Right, right. Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things I experienced too, and I experienced this personally because I did not have a proper understanding of trauma until I did trauma-informed training through foster care, and I had to experience that with particularly a child in our care who had some very significant, he was on the spectrum pretty significantly, as well as the trauma that he had in his background, and learning how differently he reacted towards ways that we would discipline or address our children. It would have the opposite effect on him. And I think then I finally could visualize this idea that trauma is something that actually alters things in the brain, and so it's a real physical thing. And I think some people don't see it that way, and that's hopefully something we can help people to understand, not only about others that are going through something traumatic, but as they look at their own lives and what they've been going through. In this particular case, with chronic pain and chronic illness, that it makes sense that they may need some help to navigate through that struggle. I know I certainly have needed help many times along the journey. And so let's get into biofeedback a little bit, since that gives us something really specific to talk about in terms of help. And let's talk about it, first of all, from just its connection to some Christian ideas. If you use biofeedback to help people learn what calm and peace feels like in their bodies, how does that connect with the Christian ideas of rest, and shalom, or the peace of Christ?
Well, I feel like that the busyness of our world has created an environment that even the strongest believer might not be experiencing the peace of God due to poor sleep, the pace of their
Hmm.
life, the things that are going on, inability to deal with stress, even feeling like somehow that it's their responsibility to be working 17, 18 hours a day. It's almost like there's some pride there. I can do this. It has to be done. And it's like, I do not believe that God created us to work ourselves into the ground
Yeah.
or to be miserable all the time or to be constantly far, far from a state of peace.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that insight, and yeah, I completely agree. And so, how does biofeedback help address that? And maybe too, for people like myself who weren't familiar with this term and how it works, what does it look like when you start to participate in this process of biofeedback?
So the client sits in front of a computer, like just a screen, and I have a screen and they have a screen. And my screen has their brainwaves on it and allows me to alter things during the training. And their screen, I'm going to describe what it used to look like because I feel like this will make more sense to people. Just 15, 20 years ago, there were 3 seconds between what happened in a client's brain and what happened on the screen. So the feedback, there was a lag. Now there's 300ths of a second. So as computers go faster and faster, everything becomes better, but also it's like I don't think it's as clear to people what we're doing and why. But when I explain this, at some point this analogy is going to, like, somebody's going to say, "What's Pac-Man?" and I'm going to know, like, I've used this analogy too long. But there was like a Pac-Man on a screen that looked like the old Pac-Man. And when the brain was doing what we wanted, in other words, the frequency was aligned with what the computer was asking for, the Pac-Man would move forward, eat the dots, and you would hear beep, 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 beep. Like that's like saying yes, 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 yes. When the brain would make frequencies or brain waves that were not productive, say that correlated with pain or anxiety or poor focus, the Pac-Man would slow, and then if the brain didn't go ahead and correct, it would turn black and wait, and then the brain would correct and off it would go again.
Hmm.
So you were just saying yes, 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 and no, no, no for the whole session. And the brain is brilliant. It is not the conscious brain. You don't have to understand. You don't have to want it to work. That's some of the best things about biofeedback because you've got electrodes on your head and your brain waves move through those electrodes onto the computer, but nothing comes through the electrodes into your brain. The feedback is simply on the screen in front of you. And when you think about what we can accomplish through literally just showing the brain what to do, like not telling it, nothing goes through the electrodes. We're just showing the brain, don't make those frequencies, make these frequencies. And as you do that, you're creating a calmer brain that's more organized. And once you figure out, like, okay, this is where we need to be, then you just reinforce it with a few sessions. You go at it over and over, just showing the brain, do this, do this, do this. The brain is brilliant. I've worked with very small children, and I've worked with people that had a stroke, and I've worked with all ages in between. And I've never found a brain that wouldn't do what we wanted it to. Because I used to ask questions like, well, what happens if the brain doesn't like the beeps? What happens if they don't, and they're like, Dana, just do it. And I'm like, I'm going to, but what? And they're like, you're not going to have that problem. Because to me, that made sense that there might be some people that are like, I don't like how you're reinforcing me. But it just isn't the case. If you give the brain good information, the brain can learn and grow and make new connections, recreate connections that have been restored. In terms of pain, I feel like what we're doing, one of the main things we're doing is, when you hurt all the time, your whole body gets tight. And the more you hurt, the tighter you get, and the tighter you get, the more you hurt. And it's like, how do you get into that cycle of this constant pain and tension? Well, sometimes we do it with muscle relaxer. Sometimes, there's things but all of those interventions also have side effects. Where with biofeedback, we just show the brain, don't do that. Let's do this instead. And um, you give this release of the tension because the brain is calmer now. And then if the brain can learn to idle at this low place as opposed to the high place it was idling before, then it's like you're starting off at an advantage, if that makes sense, because
Mm-hmm.
you're just calmer and more relaxed from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering if you could share a story. I mean, obviously protecting confidentiality, but
Right.
something that you've seen of a transformation that's taken place through this method.
Yes, I'm trying to think of a good pain story. Um, so an interesting one. I've done a lot of migraines, headaches, neck pain, back pain. That is very, very common in our world. So that's something that comes through the door often. I had somebody that had constant headaches to the point they took very, very strong, like pain meds at home. Like their husband would just give them a shot to knock them out. The pain would be so bad.
Wow.
And on top of the headaches, they had 2 to 3 migraines a week. And very quickly, in a matter of weeks, there would be hours of the day she didn't have headaches, but in a matter of months, the headaches were gone, and she was just having a little breakthrough migraine here and there. And I I was so happy for her because I just kept thinking, how, like, if I have a headache, to me, it feels like a really big deal. I'm like, ugh, like, it's like I'm going to come to work or I'll wash the dishes or cook dinner, whatever I need to do. But it's like it is a constant disruption.
Yeah.
So the thought that somebody lived like that all the time was unbelievable to me.
Right. And there are a lot of our listeners who struggle with those chronic migraines and things like that. So it's good to hear about a positive result in that regard. You mentioned in a matter of months. Is that a typical time frame for people to experience some positive results, or does it just vary?
Well, a lot of people, and like she came to see me probably a good 20 years ago, and I feel like we had a lot slower time of, things didn't move as quickly as they do now. Um, Headaches tend to resolve pretty quickly. If there is a muscle tension component, we
Mm-hmm.
can grab a hold of that really quick. I also find a lot of people have headaches because they don't sleep well. So that's like one of the first things we try to get under control. So yes, we have very quick results, but the what we look at in terms of Restore Plus, one of the reasons I wanted to shift from my kind of weekly meetings with people and working on things into something more intensive was for the crowd of people who who are stuck where they are. And so at Restore of Ada, you get 5 months of biofeedback in 2 weeks. So you're getting 2 sessions every day for 2 weeks. And that is the optimum way. You give the brain all that information and the shift takes place so rapidly because it's also like a lot of other interventions are happening at the same time that helps that nervous system calm down. If somebody's in chronic pain, their nervous system is very dysregulated and needs to be reset.
Yeah. Well, I can believe that for sure from my own experience. And I wanted to shift the conversation just a little bit to talk about burnout, because one of the things you've said are many people are asking more of themselves than their nervous system can sustain. So we're overloading it in some way. So what does burnout look like when it shows up in the body, mind, and soul?
Well, I think it looks different for different people, but I think some people are living their whole life from that. It's very frequent that I have these young moms that have 3 or 4 kids and they all have 3 activities, 4 activities apiece. So they go to school and then they pick them up and they drive around till 6 or 7 at night and then they go home and try to figure out dinner and then they try, like, I don't think that is sustainable. Even if you can keep moving in that direction, the quality of your life is diminished. Like I think that people have settled on low quality of life, thinking there's nothing I can do about this. I have kids, they should get to do things, or I have responsibilities at work and I feel like it's not uncommon for people to stay at work till 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, it has to be done. And I just think there is always a different way. It may not be the way we necessarily are thinking it should be done, but the bottom line is, when we get to the end of our life, are we going to say, I really wished I would have worked more? I don't think so.
Right.
I think that we're going to recognize that relationships and like too, like the quality of our life, if there is not time to rest, if there's not time to eat good food, if there's not time to make sure that you're spending time with the people you love, like what's the point in all the work?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. It ties back earlier into something you said regarding the way God has created us. He didn't create us to work all the time. And we see that in the original creation story, that the last thing he does is, he makes the Sabbath day holy. And in other words, and I'm not talking about, observing a particular day in the way that the Jewish law required. I'm talking about the rhythms of life that are inherent in the way we're created. And so when we do not take time to rest, we're missing out on a lot of what God wants us to enjoy about life. And it seems like that was something very important to God from the very beginning. And just from my own personal experience, I have noticed that a lot of times when I'm feeling very stressed, and I can step back from that, and I notice that there are a lot of things I feel like I have to do and need to be done in this time frame, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I really ask myself who's really expecting that out of me, it ends up just being me alone. In other words, it's a manufactured or fabricated pressure from my own set of expectations about what I have to do. And I can kind of take a deep breath when I finally realize that, and to relax a little bit and remind myself too that not everything that happens in my life is about my constant effort and busyness. And so, what you're saying is something that I find very beneficial because of my own struggles. So certainly for people who struggle with that, which I think are a lot of us, these are good reminders. And so I want to talk about too regarding trauma and its impact if it's not addressed. Kind of how that impacts maybe how we would experience God, how we would experience relationships with others. So if that's not addressed, how can and kind of looking back what happens early in life as well, but how can early life experiences shape a person's capacity to experience God, trust others, or regulate emotions later in life?
Well, kind of an extension of the idea of trauma would be attachment. And because without healthy attachment, it's like that healthy attachment is the foundation of mental health. And the way it should happen is a baby is born, and typically, a mother, but also like a father and other family members are meeting the needs of the baby. The baby cries, the mother comes. The baby's hungry, the mother feeds the baby. The baby's dirty, the mother cleans the baby. Thousands and thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
And then the child's perception of the world is, this world is safe. Like I can have a need and somebody will meet it. And that event that takes place, that long group of events that take place over that first year of life, is literally a determining factor in whether you can or can't have good mental health. So when you look at that, it's a big deal.
Right.
And a lot of things we're calling other things. Like, the first thing we see with kids that don't have good attachment is behavior problems. And we'll give them all kinds of diagnosis because they have these behavior problems. And then as they grow older, it begins to look like poor focus, difficulty with school tasks, difficulty completing tasks, and then grow a little older, and they'll begin to get diagnoses such as bipolar disorder. All of this is trauma. It's like, I'm not saying they don't meet these criteria,
Sure.
but it's like we mislook at why. The reasons why they meet the criteria are because of those hard early years, and it can be a trauma that we think of like a big T trauma, like a child is beaten or thrown or something horrible. But even more traumatic than that is neglect. Because when you're being beaten and hurt, lots of times that is followed up by love and compassion. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have treated you that way. Here's some candy. Please forgive me. Here, let's watch a show together. So it's like the person doing it has regret, and then we'll go ahead and connect with the child. So we have this kind of like come closer, get away kind of thing. The kid has to deal with that, but there's some good there. But with neglect, neglect is like you don't exist.
Wow.
It's like you're basically invisible. And the data tells us that neglect is the worst thing that can happen to a child, which is really hard for us to imagine. But that's what all the data says, is like the neglect is the most harmful thing. So when these things happen, obviously they are traumatic and they structure the way you see the world. If your dad was horrible to you, it would not be a big stretch to not trust God.
Hmm.
Like, it's like we call him Father God. We call
Right.
him, our Father in heaven. Well, why would anybody not think somehow like the Father I know isn't so great? So what do I think? Not that correlation is very strong. And I've met a lot of people, and I say, what part of the Trinity are you most comfortable with? Because I feel like if they have issues with God, then when I talk about things, I want to talk about Jesus. Like, because it's like we want that the Trinity piece they're the most comfortable with to be the one they get to know better first. And then we can step in and try to think and talk about the reasons why maybe they're struggling with God, or why the Holy Spirit feels, not okay to them. And for some people they have an issue with Jesus, but usually Jesus is the one they're like, yeah, that's, I trust Jesus. Like, Jesus, I feel like it's okay to, he'll be good to me, or which it's such an intriguing thing to hear the inner workings of the way somebody thinks about God.
Yeah. Yeah. That is interesting. And just a very interesting perspective in regards to how we relate to God and how the things that have happened to us in life can shape that. But it sounds like in what you're doing, that it's not hopeless for people that have gone through some of this, even if the intervention is late, that there could still be hope for them to become healthier. Am I saying that correctly? Is that right?
Yes, there's a term called neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity equals hope, because neuroplasticity means it is never too late to change. I have seen things that looked hopeless and look like, what in the world can we do? And with time and effort and energy and intervention, I firmly believe that everyone can heal.
Yeah. Well, we need that hope. I think that's one of the things that our two works that we're talking about here today, with Broken and Mended and with what you're doing with Restore Veda and Restore Plus, have in common is we want to offer hope to people. We want people to know that we don't want them to despair, and want them to find hope in Christ and hope that they can have a better future than what they've experienced up to the present. I want to talk about then specifically kind of how that's working out for you in your life there in Ada. So I want to talk about Restore of Ada, which did I see was started in 2024? Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, this is really just a very much a fledgling project. It's like I've been thinking about it for about 15 years, but I couldn't figure out how to swing it with all that I was trying to do in my private practice. So we now have a space, and we now have a model, and we have all of the pieces. And we did run our program a month last year, like two different 2-week sessions, and it was amazing to see people get what they needed, to see how quickly they felt better, even like we would have parents. If a child comes, their parent needs to be with them, and like just the breakthrough that we had with parents being able to receive the interventions. The parents are able to receive all the interventions the children receive except biofeedback. So there's PEMF therapy. We look at the way the body stores fascia, trauma in fascia. We look at all these different things that you can do with us, but then also on your own to alleviate the impact of that trauma. Having a child from a hard place is a traumatic event.
Yeah, for sure. And so the way this program works sounds like it's like an intensive segments over a couple weeks. Is that kind of how it
It
works?
starts with 6 weeks at home. And your
Okay.
6 weeks at home, we meet with you weekly and we determine how that time will be spent based on like an initial interview. It's like whatever the person, we feel like that person needs to be prepared to come to Ada and to do the intensive part. That's what we try to accomplish in that 6 weeks. We talk about attachment, we talk about what are we eating and what are we drinking, and we look at different ways that we can begin this process at home. How do we get our brains ready? Sadly, a lot of people don't even drink water. A dehydrated brain is not prepared to make the changes we would like to get done in this quick period of time.
Hmm.
So we try to just determine all of the possible things we need to accomplish in this 6 weeks, meeting with people and meeting them where they are and encouraging them to make changes. Then they come to Ada for 2 weeks and they are with us each day from 9 to 3.
Okay.
And then and they get an AM biofeedback and a PM. And then in the midst of that, um, we do a lot of education and we have a lot of tools. We have heart rate variability, we have PEMFs, we have physical things, all of these things that will begin that reset of the nervous system. We learn about the impact of the gut on the brain. We make more of our feel good hormones and neurotransmitters in our gut than we do our brain.
Hmm.
And our brain will be no healthier than our gut. So it is a definite journey. But in that 2 weeks, people get refreshed. They leave with a new brain. It is calmer, it is more organized, they are sleeping better. But then the follow up to that is Restore Plus. And Restore Plus has all this practical information along with access to myself. And I have a partner, Nancy, and we do live sessions, we meet with people, we do all these practical things because it healing the nervous system is not one thing. It won't be healed with just biofeedback. It won't be healed with just prayer. It won't be healed with just better food. It's a lot of things. And when you put them all together, you can get your body in a better place than, for some people, in a better place than they have ever been. But for others, they can get back to where they used to be in this healthier place where their nervous system is a help to them instead of a hindrance.
Okay, thank you for that. And when we were talking before we went live, you kind of were explaining that Restore Plus is not only for the people who have been able to come to Ada and be part of the program and therefore using it as a follow-up. How would Restore Plus be helpful and available to others that maybe just live far away from Ada or just not able to come?
Right. One of the things that we decided early on is that Restore Plus would be inexpensive, and because to me that gives some availability to everyone. The cost of Restore Plus is $7 a month. And I think that most people could just, skip a coffee and manage
Yeah.
to afford that and have access to all of these different things. There is so much information there. And I tell people it can be overwhelming, but I don't want it to be. I want it to be, we've tried to organize it in such a way that you find something that resonates with you and then you do it until you're good at it. Whether it's, okay, we are going to start cooking one anti-inflammatory meal a week. Inflammation is huge. That
Yeah.
it is the cause of all disease. If your cells aren't inflamed, you don't have cancer. If your joints aren't inflamed, you don't have arthritis. If your brain's not inflamed, you don't have dementia. So it's
Hmm.
like figuring out how to introduce things into your body that lower your inflammation is a big deal. We also have things that explore your own attachment style and how that attachment style impacts all your relationships. And if your relationships are better and healthier, your nervous system is better. There, we talk about exercise, we talk about supplements, we talk about what foods do what for you. Like there is so much there that somebody could just read a little bit and then work through it and then come back and pick up something else. And then included in that is that online portion, which allows for question and answers and gathering of more skills and information.
Okay, that sounds amazing, and yes, very sounds very affordable. And so, if we just put your website in the the show notes, would they
Right.
be able to find out everything they need to by going there? I would assume.
Yes. And our website is restoreofada.com.
Okay. For those that are kind of listening from afar, don't know where Ada is. It's kind of it's south of Norman. You said, right? Did
Right.
you say 60 miles south?
Yeah, about
Okay,
60.
so a little ways from the greater Oklahoma City area, but I would still think people in the Oklahoma City area that might be listening to this that they could still get there and participate in the,
Yes. We
it's a
have
really
people from Oklahoma City that come to Biofeedback and Counseling to our outpatient clinic. We have people from Tulsa. We have, people that drive a distance to come and see us.
And is your program unique here in the state of Oklahoma, as far as you know?
I have not found anything in the US like it.
Wow.
Like I've tried to find something because just when you've got something in your head, you're like, I wonder what I can find that's like this, and I haven't found anything else like it.
All right. Well, that's awesome then for us to get to be a part of sharing it with more people, so more people can find out that this is out there, and maybe they know they need something different or at least something additional than what they've been able to receive through traditional therapy. And by the way, I was also curious: do most of the people that come to your program, are they referred, or are they just people generally just finding you online, or how do
Well,
most
I,
people
I
find you?
think I think there's a mix. It like I last year it seemed like there were just people that knew us. And that's kind of been my agenda for the last 6 months is being on a lot of podcasts, because I feel like this is not a business that will be like just people in Ada. Like my
Hmm.
current business, it's like it comes from my community, and it happens naturally. Where this is something completely different. There's going to have to be like a that idea of people hearing about you and then getting curious enough to call and talk.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're kind of coming to a close here, so I just wanted to ask before we do that, is there anything else you want to share about the program or anything that we've talked about today before we close it out?
I think that I always like to end by just telling people that there's hope. And I think that yes, I think Restore of Ada offers hope, but more than that, I think God has hope to offer.
Hmm.
And And when we look at his word, there are 8,810 promises in God's word. That is an
Wow.
astounding number. And I believe they are all ours. But it's almost like we have this gift and we never open it. We just is like, oh, that's nice, and move right past it. And I think it's so powerful to get into the scriptures and find your promises, and then you spend time with those promises every day. And because a lot of times I think rather than agree with what God says, we agree with what the medical report says, or we agree with what our best friend says, or we agree with even we agree with our body when it's not doing what we want it to do. And it's like, if God says we are healed by his stripes, then we are. If he says there is hope, then there is hope. So I just think finding those scriptures and making them our own. And when we go back to that earlier thing about how what we focus on changes our body internally, and all of those stress hormones and everything, there's so much power in what we meditate on.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just I want to thank you for sharing that, as well as just from your wisdom, experience, and training, and also your heart today. We're so glad that you were able to be on our show.
I am glad that I got to come. Thank you.
Absolutely. For those who want to learn more about Dana's work, we are going to put the links in the show notes. You did hear her say her website a moment ago, restoreofada.com, and you can also explore Restore Plus from there. I'd like to remind our listeners, too, you can check out Broken and Mended and its resources at brokenandmended.org, especially if you're looking for, well, you would find this podcast here, which you've obviously already found if you're listening, but you'll also find our support groups and social media connections and all that available on our website. And I would ask, too, that if you've been encouraged by what you're listening to, either in this episode or in other episodes of In the Seams, please rate and like the show, because that helps us to get this out to more people. So until next time, may you find God meeting you tenderly in the broken seams of your story.